All right, let's talk about consent. So, first of all, what is consent? A lot of you will have already learned something about consent. We have programs like FICARE, like ACEs, that talk about consent, particularly in a sexual context, that give you the basics. But consent isn't just about sex. But what is it? It's meant to be affirmative and clear, just like you're taught in places like FICARE. You need a yes, not just the absence of a no. You need clear, enthusiastic consent. Consent's not about you. If you're trying to get consent from someone for something, this is about them. This is about their comfort. It is not about finding a way to get a yes out of them. Consent's conditional. If you ask someone's consent for something and they say, yes, as long as we do this, if that condition is violated, that consent is no longer valid. The same way it's no longer valid if they withdraw that consent at any time. If someone says yes to something and they stop feeling comfortable 2 minutes in, that consent is no longer valid, and that's a no. You need to stop. Consent is incredibly important to the way we live our lives, both sexually and completely outside of that. So, what does consent look like? In a sexual context, consent looks like checking in frequently and from the get go, saying, are you okay? Is this okay? Does this make you happy? Setting boundaries beforehand. Can we do X, Y, and Z? If not, we don't do those things. Back off when a partner is vulnerable. If they are inexperienced, if they are intoxicated, anything like that, you do not have consent. That consent is not valid. They are not in a position where they can comfortably make that decision to consent. And it is your responsibility as the experienced or sober person in that situation to not take that consent as valid, to say, we will wait till later until you are sober or until there isn't a power dynamic here to wait for consent that can be real and can be taken as real. And make sure sexual partners feel comfortable saying no. If they don't feel like they can say anything but yes to you, that yes does not mean anything. All right, so what's consent look like outside of a sexual context? What does it look like in everyday life? It looks like setting boundaries with friends, saying, hey, I don't like if someone talks to me this way, please don't do that. Setting those boundaries ahead of time and communicating those things. You want to make sure people are comfortable denying consent. What that looks like with friends is making sure people feel comfortable telling you they are not comfortable with something you said to them or a way you've acted. You don't want people to feel like you're going to react poorly if they do that, because otherwise they don't feel like they can say no, and them not saying anything does not count for much. It looks like checking in with friends. If you get a sense that something might be off, and even if you don't, saying, hey, is the way I'm treating you okay? Unsurprisingly, this looks a lot like consent does in a sexual context, because it's something that applies outside of sex. Why is consent important? We talk a lot about sexual consent, especially in the past decade. It's become one of the more popular topics to talk about with this kind of thing, because it's important, because people's autonomy is important, but autonomy is important outside of a sexual context. It's important to being treated respectfully and like a human being. And your comfort and safety do matter outside of a sexual context. So next time we will have a year-end community conversation, because this is actually our second to last conversation. We're approaching the end of the semester. So thank you everyone, and I will see you next time.